Lunar War, 2045 prologue. The discovery, the dust over Shackleton Crater shimmered like powdered diamonds in the sunless dark. At the southern polar crest, a mining crawler, designated Prospector 3, inched forward on its segmented treads, drilling deeper into a vein no one had expected to find. Inside the crawler, lead geologist Dr. Amelia Rourke stared at her sensor display. The numbers were wrong, not just unusual, impossible. "Run it again," she whispered. Her Ukrainian assistant, Danilo Shevchenko, recalibrated the spectrometer. He looked confused, then alarmed. "It's the same," he said. "A pure metallic lattice. Unknown configuration. Zero resistance across the test strip." Dr. Rourke swallowed hard. That would mean unlimited power transfer. Danilo finished, and thrust-to-mass ratios that make fusion rockets look like antiques. In front of them, a faint golden glow pulsed from the borehole, a metal neither Earth nor Moon had ever produced. Beryllium, a game-changer, a world-changer. Dr. Rourke activated the encrypted transmitter. Prospector 3, to command. "We found something. Extraordinary." But no answer came. Instead, her screen flickered, then died. Danilo frowned. Signal interference? No. A new voice came to the crawler's open-band emergency channel, heavily accented. Mandarin. "Prospector 3, the voice said. "You are trespassing on property of the People's Lunar Federation. Power down and exit your vehicle." Dr. Rourke froze. There is no People's Lunar Federation. But Danilo was already staring at the horizon, at the silhouettes rising over the crater rim. Chinese armored walkers, moving fast. The first battle of the Lunar War will be fought not over ideology, but over a metal glowing gold beneath the ancient dust. Chapter 1. The year the sky caught fire. The year was 2045, and the world had transformed into something almost unrecognizable. What had begun as a slow march toward space had become a sprint, driven by economics, necessity, and fear. Cost of orbit had collapsed. Fusion-assisted boosters, electromagnetic rail launchers, and vacuum-guided space elevators had rewritten the rules of access to the stars. Every major power now possessed fleets of orbit-capable craft, and every craft carried weapons. In Washington, D.C., President Barron Trump stared at the intelligence briefing displayed across the Situation Room wall. Chinese armored units on the moon. A communications blackout across Shackleton Crater. And worst of all, energy signatures indicating the presence of gigawatt-class laser arrays. He exhaled sharply. Ch2 finally made his move, he muttered. His Secretary of Defense nodded. "We believe the Chinese intend to seize the entire South Polar region. All signs point to a military annexation." Around the table, military officials from the U.S., Japan, South Korea, Australia, and NATO watched grimly. The world's first resource war beyond Earth had begun. Chapter 2. The gathering storm. The world reacted to the Shackleton Crater incursion with a shockwave of political fury. But fury alone could not stop a war already unfolding in the silence of space. Across the United States, the Department of Defense shifted into a tempo unseen since the earliest years of the global war on terror, yet on a scale that dwarfed anything from the 21st century. Orbital Command, headquartered above Colorado Springs, lit up with activity. Dozens of Spacewatch officers scanned incoming feeds from Earth-facing satellites, cislunar patrols, and deep space telescopes. The enemy was already moving. U.S. was watching the first Chinese lander transport fleet, 3 massive Chinese Qianlong-class heavy landers, each the size of a football stadium, broke lunar orbit, and began their descent toward the South Pole. Their trajectories were unmistakably aggressive. Ch2 wants everything south of 50 degrees latitude, Admiral Helena Ortiz said, her voice low. Behind her, holographic projections displayed the 3 landers descending through thin arcs of orbital dust. Mining grids, water ice caverns, fusion extraction tunnels. They're planning a full annexation. President Barron Trump leaned forward in his chair. "Are you telling me they're planning to take the entire pole?" Ortiz nodded. "And they brought enough automated walkers, drone hives, and laser drills to do it." The room fell silent. U.S. and its allies would start on response framework. Operation Silver Aegis within hours, the U.S. and its allies convened via secure quantum link. Representatives from Japan, South Korea, Ukraine, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and NATO Europe appeared across the Situation Room display. On the far right tile sat Ukrainian President Natalia Holovenko, the first Ukrainian leader born after the nation's 2020s conflicts. Her voice cut through the tense air. If China controls the moon's south pole, she said, they control Irelium, and whoever controls Irelium controls the next century. Murmurs echoed across the delegates. President Trump raised a hand. We need a unified response. One mission, one command structure. That, said the Japanese defense minister, would be Operation Silver Aegis. A new coalition, one designed for Lunar War, more ruthless than his father. Chinese President Ch1-4 addresses his nation across the world. Billions watched the broadcast from Beijing. President Xi Longwei II, grandson of Xi Jinping, stood before a crimson banner, flanked by 4 high-ranking generals. Our scientists have discovered a resource on the moon that will uplift all mankind, Ch1-4 declared. But the Western powers seek to steal this gift from humanity. He paused knowingly. China will not allow it. Satellite imagery painted a stark contrast. Chinese forces were already fortifying Crater. The broadcast ended with a final pledge. Whoever controls the moon controls humanity's future. The U.S. and its allies would mobilize a fleet. The first phase of Operation Silver Aegis began in the early hours before dawn. Fusion tail boosters ignited across California, Australia, Japan, and Cape Canaveral. Dozens of crude interceptors, supply haulers, laser platforms, and orbital gunships lifted into the sky with no attempt at subtlety. The world watched as streaks of blue-white fire climbed into the upper stratosphere. On the deck of the USS Ohio Armstrong, a carrier-sized orbital destroyer, Commander Rhea Morgan strapped herself into the pilot cradle. Her voice crackled over the command net. This is Morgan. Chapter 3. The miners of Shackleton Crater, the moon's south pole, was a fortress of shadow, a place where sunlight skimmed the horizon like a blade, leaving the deep craters in eternal darkness. Shackleton Crater was the largest of them all, a yawning permanent night. Its walls rose like black mountains. Its floor was a frozen abyss. And buried beneath that ancient lunar ice was the metal that would change humanity's future. Helionite, 3X, a mineral with properties unlike anything found on Earth. It was stronger than titanium, lighter than carbon fiber, and, most importantly, it could stabilize quantum fusion reactors without degradation. It wasn't just valuable. It was priceless. The country that controlled Helionite, 3X, would control space itself. The mining complex, the U.S., Japan. Joint lunar extraction facilities sat on the inner rim of Shackleton Crater like a gleaming crown. Its structures were angular and silver, anchored deep into the regolith. Massive pressurized tunnels connected reactors, living quarters, and storage vaults. Bright landing pads formed a triangle pattern around the perimeter. Inside, over 400 scientists, engineers, and security personnel worked in 3 shifts, Japan handling reactor stabilization, the United States overseeing extraction robotics, and Australia managing freight operations back to orbit. For the first time in history, humanity had built a functioning multinational base on another world, and almost immediately, it had become the target of the century. Dr. Yumi Takahashi, lead Japanese physicist, Dr. Yumi Takahashi, floated gently in the micrograv lab, her dark hair drifting like ink in water. She was the world's foremost expert on Helionite, 3X stabilization. At only 41 years old, she had already received 2 Nobel Prizes, one in physics, one in materials engineering. Her voice was calm as she dictated her logbook. Sample batch 37 alpha shows a 0.2% increase in superconductor retention. This confirms the new lattice compression technique is viable. The implications for propulsion are extraordinary. She hesitated. And dangerous, because the more they understood Helionite, 3X, the more the rest of the world wanted it. The underground rumble at 0234 station time, a tremor shook the mining complex. Not large, not violent, just a soft vibration through the floor, like a giant heartbeat deep below. Dr. Takahashi looked up, startled. Seismic activity? On the moon? Dr. Mateo Ruiz, the American geologist in charge of subsurface mapping, frowned at the instruments. No, that wasn't a quake. That was machinery. They exchanged a look. A bad one. Machinery meant someone else was digging. But nobody, officially, had permission to mine in Shackleton other than the Allied coalition. Check the far side scans, Takahashi ordered. Ruiz swallowed hard. I've been checking them every day. And Ruiz brought up the holographic display. A faint glowing line ran under the crater floor, a tunnel trajectory. A long one. Too long. Too straight. Someone's drilling horizontally, he said quietly, toward us. The secret tunnel emergency lights flickered on across the lab. Internal alarms began to sound, not loud, but sharp, precise, coded for scientists. A technical alert, not a life support alert. Takahashi's voice tightened. How long has this been happening? Ruiz exhaled slowly. At least 2 weeks. My team thought the data was noise, or a sense of malfunction. But now, he gestured at the seismic signature, still rippling across the display. Now it's unmistakable. They were being dug toward, by a rival state, by China's Black Sands Mining Division, most likely, the covert military arm of their lunar program. If China reached the Allied mining complex through a subsurface tunnel, they could breach the foundation from below. No orbital defenses, no surface patrols, no satellites would detect the approach. It would be a perfect sneak attack. The call TO orbit, Dr. Takahashi slammed her hand on the comm interface. Get me the Armstrong. Several seconds passed, the delay between lunar surface and lunar orbit. Then Captain Mara Ellison's image flickered onto the screen. She looked exhausted, armor strapped to her chest, red lights flashing behind her as her ship prepared for confrontation. Doctor, this is a bad time. We're tracking possible hostiles. This is hostile. Takahashi cut in. She transmitted the seismic data. Ellison's eyes widened. That's not a geological pattern, she whispered. That's a drill head. Takahashi nodded grimly. It's coming straight toward our main reactor vault. If they breach the foundation, we lose everything. Armstrong's response, Ellison shouted to someone off-screen. Get me tactical. Patching the Australians and the Japanese command group. A moment later, the feed stabilized. Dr. Takahashi, Ellison said, we're deploying 2-type for surface rovers and a drone squad to your location. But if China is tunneling, they may already have troops on the far side of that passage. Takahashi didn't blink. We can seal the tunnel from our side, but we need authorization to initiate a reactor vent ignition. Ellison hesitated. That could destroy half your equipment. It could save all of our lives. Ellison nodded sharply. I'll push it to Washington right now. Hold position. Reinforcements inbound. The feed cut. The lab fell silent. Deep below their feet, the mysterious drilling grew louder. The first breach minutes later, a second vibration shook the floor, harder this time. Loose instruments rattled. A toolbox fell over. Dust floated up in shimmering clouds under the artificial lights. Ruiz stiffened. They're close. Very close. Takahashi whispered, How close? Ruiz looked at the seismic chart again. His face turned white. 20 meters. Maybe less. The breach opens the floor vibrated again, this time with a sharp, metallic crack that echoed to the entire substructure. A sound that did not belong on the moon. A sound that made every nerve in the human body flinch. Ruiz backed away from the wall. Takahashi. That's them. They're cutting into the foundation plate. Another crack. Louder. Longer. Then a hiss. Faint at first, like escaping steam, except there was no steam on the moon. Just pressure equalizing. The wall panel at the far side of the reactor staging room began to bulge inward. Dust streamed from the seams. A slow, tortured bend spread across the titanium composite plating. Takahashi's voice dropped to a whisper. Everyone, back, now. They retreated behind a support pillar as the wall groaned again, metal deforming under force from the other side. And then, a cutting torch's bright arc seared through the plating. A perfect, glowing circle began carving itself from the inside out. Ruiz whispered, "Oh God, they're here." The first incursion team, the circular plate, fell inward with a heavy clank. Lunar dust scattered, and from the darkness of the freshly cut tunnel, figures emerged. Sleek armored suits, gloss black plating, cobalt visors, Chinese insignia embossed beneath layers of dust. Black Sands Division, elite lunar infiltration unit, a secret force designed for zero-atmosphere combat. Takahashi's blood ran cold. The lead soldier held a compact, matte rifle, a magnetically accelerated flechette weapon optimized for vacuum. He scanned the room with precise mechanical calm. Then he saw the reactor vault and raised his hand. 3 more soldiers emerged behind him. One carried a breaching charge. One carried equipment for sample extraction. One carried a portable core stabilizer, meant to seize raw helionite. 3X. They weren't here for sabotage. They were here to steal. The fight begins. Takahashi grabbed Ruiz by the collar and yanked him backward just as the first flechette volley cut through the air, silently, but deadly. The only sound was a ping-ping-ping of metallic darts embedding in walls. The 2 scientists dove behind a lab workstation as glass burst above their heads. Monitors shattered. Instruments disintegrated. A cascade of sparks filled the room. Takahashi hissed through clenched teeth. "They'll take the vault." Ruiz tapped his wrist console. "Security team, this is Ruiz. We have a breach in reactor staging 2. Enemy forces inside the complex." A voice answered, breathless. "We hear you, we're on the way, but we're dealing with multiple pressure failures on Deck 3. More gunfire sliced through the lab. A flechette round tore through the workstation, missing Takahashi's helmet by centimeters. Another embedded in the floor near Ruiz's knee. They couldn't wait for help. They had minutes, maybe less, before the infiltrators reached the core. The reactor fail-safes. Takahashi crawled to a side console under the table, ripping off protective panel to expose emergency subsystems. Ruiz stared. "What are you doing?" She typed frantically. "If they extract even a few grams of helionite, 3X from the core chamber, they'll have enough to fabricate a stabilizer matrix." Ruiz blinked, horrified. That would give them the tech to build their own quantum fusion engines. "Exactly. So we're not letting them take anything." The screen flashed red. A warning. A confirmation requirement. Takahashi's hands hovered over control. Her voice was low. "Steady. This will seal the chamber. Invent the outer corridor." Ruiz paled. "That could kill anyone still in the hallway." Takahashi met his eyes. "They will kill millions if they get this metal." She pressed a command. The station lights flickered. A deep rumble resonated through the floor. Mechanical shutters slammed shut across the vault door. Thick, reinforced, airtight. The Chinese infiltrators reacted immediately. The team leader barked an order in Mandarin, and 2 soldiers rushed toward the vault door, while another returned fire on the scientist's hiding place. Takahashi and Ruiz ducked again as flechettes tore through the console they just used. A rival of the security team boots thundered in the hallway. A firefight erupted just outside the staging room. Muffled blasts, powerful impact against the metal walls. Then 2 American security officers in pressurized armor dove through the doorway, sliding on the floor to take cover behind overturned equipment. They returned fire with pulse carbines, bright streaks of ionized light cutting across the lab. The Chinese soldiers scattered behind reactor conduits and broken machinery. The room erupted into a silent war, muzzle flashes without sound, punctuated only by the crack of metal under stress and the hiss of decompression warnings. 1 Chinese soldier dropped. Another charged a security officer with a combat blade designed for low gravity. The struggle sent both men drifting upward before slamming into the ceiling. The American managed to pin the attacker and fire point blank. Both fell to the ground in a heap. It was chaotic, messy, terrifying. The drill team's backup plan amid the chaos. Takahashi saw movement from the corner of her eye. The remaining Chinese soldier wasn't fighting. He was pulling a device from his pack. A sphere, black, with blinking red diodes around its equator. A microcharge, one designed for reactor casing. Her breath caught. No, he's going for the vault. Ruiz reacted instantly, grabbing a fallen security officer's sidearm. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained. But he fired anyway. The shot missed the soldier, but hit the device. The sphere sparked, flashed, then detonated prematurely, not in the vault door, but in the middle of the lab. The blast wasn't large, but in a pressurized environment, it was catastrophic. A hole ripped open in the wall. Air roared toward it. Papers, shards, loose tools, everything not bolted down surged toward the breach. Takahashi and Ruiz grabbed onto a support strut as the lab decompressed. Security officers anchored themselves to railings with maglocks. A Chinese soldier wasn't as lucky. He was sucked toward the hole, slamming violently into the edge. Alarms wailed. Red lights strobed. A synthetic voice repeated, "Atmospheric breach detected. Seal integrity compromised. Evacuate immediately." The tunnel collapsed then. A deep groan echoed to the floor again. Not from machinery. This was structural. The blast had destabilized the tunnel the infiltrators used. The walls began to buckle. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ceiling. Takahashi yelled, "Everyone out! Now!" The Americans grabbed her and Ruiz and pulled them toward the exit. The lights flickered repeatedly, then went out. Dust filled the air. Debris tumbled in slow motion under the low gravity. Behind them, the tunnel the Chinese had built collapsed inward, sealing itself under tons of lunar rock. The infiltrators who remained disappeared under collapse. The breach sealed. The attack ended. The cause they stumbled into the main corridor, panting under their helmets, armor scratched and dusty. Emergency shutters sealed behind them, isolating the destroyed lab. Ruiz leaned against the wall, shaking. That was the first wave. Takahashi nodded grimly, which means there will be a second. There was no longer any doubt. China wasn't negotiating. China wasn't waiting. China wasn't competing economically. They were coming. Now, for the moon. Chapter for the vanishing fleet. The world woke on April 9th, 2045, to a headline that rippled across every screen, every radio, every emergency broadcast channel. U.S. lunar escort fleet. Lost. No warning. No distress calls. No debris detected. An entire convoy of newly built Odyssey-class transports, carrying refined quantities of Lunarium-3, had disappeared on their return journey from the moon. The cargo alone was worth more than the GDP of some nations. But the message was far clearer. Someone wanted to cripple the Allied lunar economy, and to do it quietly. The Situation Room. President Barron Trump walked into the White House Situation Room with a look that no one had seen on him before. Not anger, not annoyance, not even theatrics. It was the unmistakable expression of a man who understood a line had been crossed. National Security Advisor Kimberly Wright spoke first. "Sir, the fleet didn't just vanish. It was erased." She brought up a holographic display, orbit lines, telemetry, final pings. Then she showed the moment everything went dead. A perfect, sharp cut, simultaneous. All ships, no time delay, no fading. "Laser interdiction," she said quietly. "Something high-powered, far beyond what we've publicly seen from China or Russia." President Trump's jaw tightened. "Where?" Wright zoomed the hologram. A small dark region, far from typical orbital traffic, blinked red. It was a dead zone, a region with no satellite coverage, no civilian sensor sweeps, no commercial mapping. A place no one had thought to watch. Until now. 11-2's message to Community Link alert chimed, the secure presidential line for foreign leader emergencies. A holographic envelope appeared. It was a pre-recorded message from President Ch1-4 of China. The president raised an eyebrow. "Play it." The hologram opened. Ch1-4 appeared, seated in a chair carved from dark lunar basalt. Behind him, a massive window overlooked Beijing's smog-cleared skyline. filtered by climate domes China had successfully built years earlier. His voice was smooth. Calm. Too calm. President Trump. A message of regret. We have detected unusual activities in cislunar space. We advise the United States to halt all aggression. The moon must remain a shared asset, free from claims of ownership or exploitation. Trump laughed softly under his breath. Shared asset? They're the ones trying to plant flags on the South Pole. Ch1-4's message continued. We are expanding our security zones around Chinese lunar facilities for safety. Any unauthorized approach will be interpreted as hostile. The message ended. Silence hung thick in the room. General Raphael Stone, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, finally spoke. That message wasn't a warning, Mr. President. It was a confession. Indirect but tactical. They want us to stand down. Because they know we won't. The first leak within hours. A satellite architecture student in Poland leaked the first clue, a faint thermal signature near the dark region where the fleet vanished. Small, focused, but unmistakably artificial. A directed energy source. Likely a lunar-anchored laser array capable of firing thousands of miles into space. The leak spread faster than any government could contain it. Within minutes, Twitter, TikTok, Telegram, forums, analysts all pointed to one conclusion. China had deployed a secret space-based weapon system. World markets panicked. Allied nations demanded answers. And the U.S. Space Force urged action. The moon quarantine proposal President Trump slammed his hand lightly on the table. Enough. We're done reacting. It's time to lead. He turned to General Stone. Draft the order. I want a moon quarantine zone. Anything that comes within 500 kilometers of our lunar territory gets stopped. The room froze. Kimberly Wright whispered, Sir, that's an act of war. Trump's reply was cold, precise. They already fired the first shot. I'm just drawing a line where they can see it. In Beijing, while Washington debated, Beijing celebrated quietly. Ch1-4 stood on a balcony overlooking the Capitol as his defense chiefs congratulated him. The Americans will not risk full confrontation. One general said confidently. They are stretched thin. Their allies are disorganized. Their economy is divided. Ch1-4 only smiled. Do not underestimate a cornered nation, he said. They can be unpredictable. Yet he was certain of one thing. The U.S. would hesitate. The U.S. would take time. Time China intended to use. For construction. For militarization. For expansion. For seizing the lunar South Pole entirely. The president's decision back in Washington. The president stared at the holographic projection of the moon, glowing blue, white, and gray in the Situation Room's dim light. He didn't speak for nearly 20 seconds. Then, send the order. General Stone saluted. Yes, Mr. President. And just like that, the moon became the most dangerous place in the solar system.